Alrighty, Lucas, thanks for coming on to the second episode of the Strength Institute podcast.
Mate, thanks for having me.
Just before we get started, guys, Lucas Mata is a two-time Winter Olympic bobsledder for Australia, but didn't start in bobsledding, actually cut his teeth in sprinting. So can you just get back into what you used to do in athletics and how you got into bobsledding in the first place?
Yeah, look, I sort of fell into like athletics as well as I fell into bobsled. Like I was playing AFL for like my primary school, start of high school career, and then we were playing a tournament in year 8 in high school, and we ended up missing a couple of like athletics trainings that we got told we had to go to, and next minute I went to the training camp or training session and fell into sprinting. Ended up being pretty good at it. So then ended up doing that for all of high school, start of university, and ended up getting decent results through sprinting in WA, and had a couple of injuries here and there, and then basically a friend of a friend gave my details to the pilot in Calgary for the bobsled team. And in 2011, I got a message on my Facebook actually saying, how would I like to go to the Winter Olympics? And I was like, that's a pretty stupid question. Like, what's the catch? Like, of course I want to go to the Winter Olympics. And he said, oh, you got to run fast. You got to push a sled fast. And I said, look, I can run fast, but I've never pushed a sled in my life. So, tell me where to go from here. And then
That's awesome.
7 years later, still doing it.
Still doing it. So if we go back to your sprinting, you said you were doing pretty good on the state level and competing in athletics. Was it just the 100 meters you were doing, or were you doing 200s or anything else?
I was doing a lot of 200s, 100s, 60 meters occasionally. Like 60 meters was only like an indoor event, but we do it in outdoors. It was definitely more my strength. But yeah, mainly 100 meters and 200 meters competitively.
Okay.
And I started my career as a long jumper, but then ended up moving more towards sprints.
And what was your fastest time for a 100-meter sprint?
10:53.
10:53. So pretty quick,
Yeah.
pretty quick.
Got it quick. Yeah, some of the young boys right now are running pretty quick at the moment, so 10:53 doesn't seem so quick anymore.
Where was that 10:53 ranking you in Australia at the time for 100 meters?
At that time, I think I was ranked just in the top 10.
Yeah.
So there was a few like talks of potentially making a relay team because it was just in like coming up to the Commonwealth Games in Delhi in 2010. So it was sort of quite an exciting time for me. I was like, I'm running really quick. I've got a few doors potentially opening, but again that year I tore my hamstring. It was 6 weeks just before national champ, so missed the opportunity.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And so when you're trying to make these relay teams, are they sort of looking at usually the top 6 or 7 or fastest guys in Australia, and then usually 4 make the team, or they'll have specialized 100-meter runners first?
They'll probably take the top 6 as like a relay squad, and then they'll sort of rearrange the combination to see what works and what doesn't, and usually they'll take the top 4. They ended up making the top the relay team.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And I've done a little bit of research here, and it turns out that some of the most common crossover sports for sprinters being bobsled and luge as well.
Yeah.
Did you ever, and I know the Australian Institute of Sport, they were running some programs on trying to convert athletes from one sport to another. Did you ever get to go to any of the institutes like that and have a play around and see what you were most suited to?
I mean, I did a couple of like waist testing camps in high school to sort of see what sports you were suited to, but bobsled was definitely not one that ever came up because I was always so light. But I know the AIS did a lot of crossovers from skeleton. They were trying to, because women's skeleton started as like a brand new sport pretty much in 2002. So I know the girls program had a lot of stuff through the AIS, but not really for men's bobsled. It was quite sort of a thrown together program for us. It was never really an institute program for the men's bobsled team.
Okay, fair enough. And so you said the first time you ever in a bobsled was at a race day. Hope you got a few test runs in before the actual race.
No, mate, that was it. That was my first ever time seeing a sled. Basically, was at the top of the hill and got sort of a crash course of how to push the thing and what to do at the end when the pilot finished. And yeah, it was a crazy experience. Like, it was definitely the adrenaline rush, the G-force, like all the sort of speed and that I never thought I'd have to go through, but get to the bottom, and the pilot says, did you enjoy it? And I sort of looked at him like with my eyes wide open, saying like, that was insane.
Instantly hooked?
But yeah, well, I wouldn't say instantly hooked, but it was like such an adrenaline rush. But I was like, let me try again. Let's do another run and see what happens. So we had another run, and same sort of thing sort of took me by surprise. But 7 years later, kept doing the sport and still here.
Wow. And how fast are they going down those tracks?
So like top speeds usually around 140, 145. The Whistler
Kilometers an
track
hour.
actually is yeah, kilometers an hour. The Whistler track's the fastest track in the world, and they just reached speeds of like 157 at the World Champs a couple of weeks ago. So that was crazy.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
And then there's four guys in the sled, and you had the captain. He's obviously piloting it or driving
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
The other three positions, are there different jobs for them as well? Is it really just sprint and get in and hold tight? What do
For
you do
sure.
in a bobsled?
Yeah, so obviously the pilot's everyone pushes, so everyone's got their role on the sled to push. The pilot gets in first, and then the three guys behind him sort of sequentially get in. So the two guy, depending on where he's right or left, doesn't really matter. He sits in just behind the pilot, the number three behind him, and then the brakeman sits in the back. And basically, once they get in, the two guys in the middle don't have a whole lot of job other than just to sit there, to be like a sack of potatoes, pretty much, is like we like to say it.
Just
Um,
extra weight in the sled?
yeah, exactly. I mean, their job's important. Their job's over in the first 5 seconds, but then they're just extra weight. And then the guy at the back, his job basically, as soon as we cross the line, his job's to stop the sled, to finish at the finish dock. But basically, the pilot does it, like I would say 80% of the work.
Okay,
Like
wow.
once everyone's in the sled.
And so what was your position when you first started bobsledding then?
I was a brakeman, so I started in spot number three.
Yeah.
So that was because the guy behind was a bit more experienced than me, and then we sort of found that I had a bit faster wheels than him, so they put me on the back, and then yeah, basically for the 2.5 years I was doing the sport leading up to Sochi, I was sitting on the back of the sled as the brakeman. So my job was basically to push and then stop the sled at the
Fair,
end.
fair
Yeah.
enough. And so you're saying weight's important in the sled. Did you
hmm
have to change your sort of body shape a lot going from sprinting into bobsled?
For sure, definitely. Like, I mean, I had to try and I almost had to train like a power lifter, but a power lifter that could sprint a 30 super quick.
Okay.
Um, so it was tough. Like, I had to do a lot more weight training, had to eat a lot more. So I was gaining a lot of weight. So I probably gained like over the leading up to Sochi, I gained like 20 kilos.
Oh wow.
Um, but then had to try and, stay quick. But what I found was the more powerful I got, and even the heavier I got to a certain point, the faster I actually became and more powerful, which is quite good. So sort of after 20 kilos, I was actually running faster than I was when I was 74 kilos.
Wow.
So
That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
it sort of worked out pretty good.
Yeah, nice. And so in terms of training regimen to help put on 20 kilos, you're saying you're training like a power lifter. I'm assuming there's a lot of like Olympic lifting as well or
Yeah.
explosive lifts.
Yeah, a lot of Olympic lifting, a lot of explosive, like lots of squats, like basically squats and power cleans are the bread and butter of a bobsledder.
Right.
Getting that size on and obviously be able to move the weight quickly. That's the ideal thing. And obviously the beach weights are always important, but I've never had good guns, but
Fair enough, fair enough. And so what does the training regimen look like then? How many days a week are you in the gym? How many times a week are you on the track practicing with the bobsleds? And where do you
yeah,
even get to train? Because there's not a lot of snow here
yeah,
in Western Australia or ice.
yeah,
So how do you
yeah.
how do you get that hands-on experience?
Yeah, so during the summer months for the winter nations, which is like the sort of March until, you know, I would say like March until September, all the tracks in the world are shut down. So all the bobsled tracks, there's no ice on them or anything. So everyone's basically doing the same thing. We're all in the gym or on the track. Um, So like my program used to look like 4 gym sessions a week. So I'd usually do 2 legs, 2 upper body sessions, and then have like a pure sprint session, and then like a plyometrics session in there as well. So I usually train like 6 to 7 times a week, if I can, but I try and sort of condense them into like 5 days of the week so I can have some days off, because trying to fit in, train every day, you don't really get a whole lot of recovery. And
Sure.
one thing I found in training is that recovery is probably the most important part of training. So so there would be like 2 or 3 days where I'd double up sessions, where I'd sprint in the morning or sprint in the afternoon and lift in the morning. And so usually about 6 to 7 times a week I'll be training.
Wow, that's a lot of training there.
Yeah, 100%, a lot of
Yeah.
training, especially from being a sprinter, going from 5 days a week to then 5 days a week, but then trying to cram in 7 to 8 sessions. It's tough.
Yeah. And so that's in the summer months. What
hmm
about in the winter months when the ice is on the track then?
Yeah, so the weights usually stay quite similar, but the more the sprint sessions turn into sessions that you're at the track, because obviously every day you're pushing a bobsled, um, and driving. Like I'm sprinting, I'm warming up as if I'm doing a training session anyway. So the sprints don't slow down, but they change to more pushing a bobsled. And we spent a lot of time in Calgary, and Calgary in Canada has like an indoor push facility, like with ice and everything. So basically, you don't have to go down the track the whole time. Every
Sure.
time you push, you can push indoors, and it's perfect. They opened it in July in the summer, and then basically um, all year round they have this thing open to practice pushing. So we use that as our sprint sessions during the winter.
Okay, so you had to actually fly there to get on site to use these facilities and tracks and
Yeah,
everything like that.
yeah, for sure. So I moved my home basically over to Calgary in 2013, because I thought, leading into the Olympics, I've got to be where the hub is of bobsled. So all the Canadians were training there, and most of the Aussie team was in Calgary. So I moved my whole life over to Canada for 2013, and then basically fell in love with the place, and have basically been here for the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah, moved there. So you ended up going to two Olympics, the 2014, which was in Sochi, and then the
Yep.
2018 in Pyeongchang in South Korea.
hmm
And you said you're still doing bobsledding, still competitively?
At this stage, I took this year off just purely to sort of rest the mind, rest the wallet. The wallet was definitely the one thing that copped it a little bit. Um, and then to really see whether I wanted to continue, because Australia doesn't have a program for bobsled, so it's a lot of on us, like our own funding and our own organisation. But um, I definitely miss it, because I drive the tourists down the bobsled track. Like I'm in Whistler right now, and like today's work, basically I did 8 runs from halfway down the track driving tourists down, and
Oh
it's
wow.
uh it's it's tough to it's tough to sort of get to the bottom and be upset, because everyone's super excited when they get out there. It's their first ever bobsled run, and so you're taking people on their first ever bobsled run, and you definitely miss it. So I don't know. You might see me back next year, starting again for the campaign for Beijing 2022. So yeah, I don't know.
Very cool, very cool. And how fast are those tourists getting to go on the track if it's just a half a run?
Yeah, they ended up, like, the Whistler track's the fastest in the world, and they ended up still going 130 kilometers an hour. So
Oh wow. And so
yeah, so
you're
people get a
piloting that one.
yeah. So the
Yeah.
tourist bulbs are a little bit different than the normal ones. Like I do everything. I basically drive and brake as well. So I have like foot brakes. So I do all the job, but yeah, it's a phenomenal job to have, and people love it.
The next question is, you started off as a brakeman. Did you
Yeah.
stay as a brakeman for both of the Olympic campaigns, or did you change your position as you became more senior in the squad?
Yeah, so like I was a brakeman for the first 3 years of the sport, and then it got to after the Olympics, and I thought, like, I really want to continue doing the sport, but I want to challenge myself a little bit. So I thought, I'm going to go to Calgary after. So this is pretty much like 2 or 3 weeks after the Olympic Games in Sochi. I decided to go back to Calgary, and then jump in a sled to drive. I just wanted to experience it and see what it was like, and see if I'd like it. And it was so much fun. And then I ended up going to Lake Placid, New York, driving that track as well. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to continue doing the sport, but I want to, be in the front seat. So the pilot that drove me in Sochi, he ended up competing for a couple of years after as well. So we actually had two Australian two-man teams.
Okay.
And then he was still driving four-man, but I started just driving two-man at the start for 2014, 2015 season, and then jumped into the four-man the next year, and developed my own squad, and had a couple of guys come with me. One guy that was in Sochi with me as a brakeman, he came and joined my team, and so we had two teams going for a couple of years after the Sochi Olympics.
Okay. All right. And that's great. And then your team went to the 2018.
Yeah.
And then if you decide to get back in there for the 2022 in Beijing,
Yeah.
Is it the same deal? Are you going to look for the same guys? Are you going to try to get a brand new team?
Yeah, so I've been speaking to the guys that went with me to Pyeongchang, and they're definitely keen to jump back in the sled if I if I jump back in, they're sort of like, yep, we want to sort of jump behind you. So I'm sure there'll be a few more people that want to jump on board too. But it'd be cool to get a couple of teams running around the tracks and sort of get a bit of a program going, which is what we need to potentially get a bit of competition and funding as well. The more
Right.
people we have, the more funding we can potentially get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of training, we've touched on the gym work that you were doing and the hands-on at the track and the indoor facilities. What about any sort of mental training? I think anyone that grew up in the late 80s or early 90s has seen Cool
Yeah.
Running, where the main guy
Yeah.
is sitting in the bathtub, focusing and visualizing on all
Yeah.
of his turns. Is there much mental training from your side of things?
Yeah, for sure. As a pilot, like the more mental runs you do, it's like it's basically an extra run you can do down the track. Um, so before every session, we'll do a track walk, and we'll walk from bottom up or top to the bottom, and we'll walk each turn, and we'll like discuss with our coach or like other teammates and stuff about what the steer is in each corner. And at first it's pretty hard to remember even which of the corners goes left or right, once you learn the track. But then once you fully learn the track, you can, like, I could close my eyes now and I could visualize any track that I've driven, and sort of explain what steer I'm doing in each corner. And you'll see a lot of, mental mind runs. People will close their eyes and move their hands like this. And yeah, so it's definitely a lot of mental training for the pilot. As a brakeman, you just fire up, take a few scoops of pre-workout and push the hell out of the sled. But for the pilot, it's definitely a lot of mental training.
Third party assured supplements though, to make sure that you don't get any
100%
contamination.
clean sport.
Clean sport, that's right. Well, that's really interesting there. So, did that take a bit of time for you to sort of develop that visualization skill?
For sure, yeah. Like it's hard to sometimes close your eyes and picture what you want to see. And when you've been down the track so many times, I could see each corner, perfectly. So at the start, it was a little difficult because I would sometimes close my eyes and be like, oh yeah, I forgot which corner, which way that corner went. But you get used to it after you do a cut like 10 or so runs down the track. You know the track inside out. So
Fair enough. So, how long are the actual bobsled tracks? Do they vary from site to site,
yeah,
or are they a standard distance?
yeah. So each one's different. So like the one here is 1,600 meters long. Then there's like Park City's like a super short one's like 1,400 meters long. So it all varies, and they all have different types of turns. Some tracks like Calgary have a Kreisel, which is like a 360-degree turn. Some tracks will have uphill sections. Some will be all downhill. Like this one, sort of sounds stupid to sort of say a bobsled track is not all downhill, but there's some sections that are super flat. And yeah, all different types of turn. There's different types of steers in each corner. So like one corner might be a one steer corner, and then there's some corners that are three steer corners. So you're doing like three different types of things in each corner. So
Right.
it's all varied, and sort of, I guess, like leading into each Olympics, the host nation will build the track to sort of maybe suit them. So
Okay.
it sort of gives them the advantage. So you normally find that if you go to a German track, the Germans are going to be pretty good at their track. Or like the Canadians will be really good in their Canadian tracks. And so it definitely helps to have friends in all different types of nations to sort of get the tips and tricks of the shortcuts of the track and how to steer it.
Yeah, fair enough. And you said that you had, you would discuss with your teammates and with the coach. In terms of coaching, because it sounds like when you first started, there's some, really new people to it. Do you have,
Yeah.
is it sort of like captain coaching where the head of the team coaches, or do you
Yeah.
get external coaches in who are ex-bobsledders, or how does that
Yeah.
work?
Yeah, so when we started, like it was pretty much like the captain coach, like the pilot was the coach, the manager, the booking agent, like he was everything. So he was basically our first point of call to how we train for the sport and how we push, and then the more we get to know people in the sport, more people sort of help us, whether it's like firsthand or like sort of they might see us push and say, oh, next time you push, try this. Um, then we were lucky enough. I was lucky enough to be pretty close to the Canadian team. So then we had a cooperation. Um, so basically, they would help us out with sleds, with all that sort of stuff, and even coaching as well. So um, every time they went on a track walk, sort of Australia and Canada would be together, and then the Canadians would basically coach me for free. So
Okay.
so it was really good actually. So the Canadians helped me out a lot leading up to the last Olympics. So basically, we had a Canadian coach for our Olympic campaign, so that was really good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice. Now, going back to the Olympics, what
Hmm.
was that experience like? I mean, you're training, especially between, Sochi and Pyeongchang,
Hmm.
you've had 4 years of training.
Yeah.
Everyone's working hard. You're doing a lot of fundraising to get
Hmm.
the ability to get over there. What's it like? What's the experience like? How long does it last? How long is the bobsled competition portion?
Yeah.
You're going out and experiencing, the
Yeah.
area that you're in, or is it all in the Olympic Village? How does it work?
Um, so Sochi, like it was good to have two games under my belt because I could sort of compare the two. The Sochi was such an experience where I was just like everything was so new. I was like, looking around like, oh my God, that's over there, and like the opening ceremony was phenomenal. Like the goosebumps, I still get from even talking about, got walking underneath and hearing sort of Australia, and then like all the crowd going nuts, and just even in the village, like you go to the dining hall, there's all types of food in there, and then all different athletes from around the world, like the best snowboarders in the world, like Sean White, one of the best snowboarders in the world, is just walking around the village. Like, um, it's crazy. Like it's such an experience. Whereas Pyeongchang was the same as like it's still a cool experience, but it was definitely I knew it was going to happen. I could sort of enjoy different parts of it. I could sort of relax a little bit and enjoy the village and um, basically we when we get in there we have the opening ceremony and then we have a few days off straight after the opening ceremony because the luge is the first competition on the track. So they cut the ice a little differently for the luge, so they have like 6 days, I'd say 5 to 6 days of competition, and then once they finish then the skeleton and bobsled jump on board. So sort of about the 6th day on we're on the track, and then basically we'll run from day 6 until the last day where our competition's like the closing ceremony day. So usually we'll be finishing competing and then having to rush to go to the closing ceremony.
Okay.
um, so once it's on for us sort of from day 6, it's pretty much go time. So it's not a whole lot of exploring the place we're around. Um, but I mean, the village has enough cool stuff around it, and sort of you're around all cool Australian teammates and people that you look up to, like Scotty James, one of the really a really good snowboarder for Australia, and it's sort of you get to learn everyone's stories, and it's such a cool experience. Like it's I wish everyone could do it, but it's hard to get
That's why
everyone
it's
in
the
the Olympics.
Olympics. Everyone can't do it, but
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're part of
Yeah.
a small group of people to
Yeah.
to get to go.
Yeah. Super privileged, that's for sure. Yeah.
Nice. Um, all right, so you're in that spot now where you're figuring out whether you want to come back to 2020. What
Mm.
else are you doing just with yourself while you're figuring these things out? You're working at the track, taking some tourists around.
Yeah.
What else are we doing?
So I'm working at the track. I'm actually a teacher by trade, so I've just transferred all my teaching stuff over here. So, doing some relief work and sort of landed myself a job for next year. And then also started my own woodworking business, sort of like custom different woodworking stuff. So make a lot of serving boards and coffee tables and stuff like that. So it's
Fantastic.
definitely something I thought I'd get into, but after I sort of decided to take a year off from bobsled, I needed to put my energy somewhere, and that's, again, Facebook struck again. I saw something on Facebook, and I was like, yeah, that's sort of cool. So I sort of decided doing that, and yeah, it's taken off a little bit.
And that business is called?
Bearded Mountain Products.
Bearded Mountain Products. Good name.
Yeah.
And I'll link all of that information in the description of this video. So if anyone wants to have a look at what you're making or get something, they can do that.
Yeah, that'd be super sweet.
Awesome. Well, Lucas, thanks very much for coming on. Just a short one today, but I also wanted to get your story and background, and that's a really awesome story there.
Mate, I appreciate that, Nevin, and go to the Strength Institute and get strong, get some gains in there.
That's right. Thank you. Awesome. All right, Lucas, have a good one.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers. Bye.